CMA Awards focused on a really hot topic in country music that's actually been a hot topic for like a decade now. I'm Emily Jashinsky, culture editor here at the Federalist, with Evita Duffy, our excellent intern. Evita, thank you so much for chatting about this.
Great to be here.
So Evita wrote an article about this. She wrote an article about how the CMA Awards, which were held on Wednesday night, went really hard on the female empowerment theme. Evita, what were some of the things that the women of country music and probably the men of country music were talking about on the CMA stage last night?
Well, the first and most important thing was the theme of the night was equal play. So it basically meant that both men and women were equally represented on stage last night. In addition to that, they also implemented a new equal play award for a woman annually who has done, or made great strides in female empowerment for country music. So that was really the big takeaway and theme of the night.
I just think that's so insulting, right? So this debate has been raging about country music for about a decade now, when the bro country genre kind of started skyrocketing on radio, and there's all of a sudden this conversation, and a DJ sort of famously said that women are like the tomatoes in the country music salad. That there was also this belief among executives and people in the industry that country music fans preferred male artists. And there's been a lot of debate about why men are played more than women on country radio. I think this is a perfectly legitimate debate, because I think country music's history of female artists is rich, and fascinating, and provides important representation in our pop culture. But at the same time, there's a difference between sort of victimizing the women of country music and then asking, what's going on, right? If you sort of jump to the victimhood narrative, that's different. And it sounds, Evita, like there was a lot of sort of self-victimization at the CMAs last night.
Yeah, I mean, there was a really big, long, dramatic montage of women talking about how they didn't feel like they were fairly treated in country music, and it was definitely, it was the theme of the night. And so I think that women in country music, it is a problem, like you said. I mean, there is an underrepresentation of female airtime, and we do have country music does have this great history of producing really amazing female artists. And so the question is, why is this happening? And the CMAs seem to say, well, it's gender inequality and it's discrimination, and that was kind of the suggestion all night long, which is what's happening, and that they're taking this stand against that. And when you look at pieces that you've written, and now what I wrote today, it's actually that's actually not true, because if it was sexism, we would have seen that trend throughout country music history, and we haven't seen that. I mean, you reported a year ago that back in the 90s and the early 2000s, women actually were played pretty equally on country radio and in the top charts. And actually, not only that, there was actually a point in time where there were more women in the top charts. And so I think that the argument is kind of void when you look at the history of country music. And so then the question is, what is the cause of it?
Right. This is getting right to the heart of the issue, which is that people who complain about this often, their primary charge is sexism, right? So they attribute this pattern to sexism, which is easily debunked. People have literally done research on this, where they take the airplay from the country radio throughout the decades, um, 80s, 90s, 2000s, 2010s, and look at the proportion of songs played by male and female artists, songs in the top of the charts by male and female artists. And that proportion has been much more equal at certain times in country music's history, which is really interesting, especially that period of 90s where you had the divas, who could really belt out, like, your Martina McBrides, your Faith Hill, your Trisha Yearwoods, who were all largely coming up at the same time. There are periods in country music's history where there has been more equitable airplay. And so the argument then would have to be that country music has gotten more sexist as the rest of the country has gotten less sexist. So as women continue to sort of advance culturally on country music, that's declining. And I don't really think there's a good case for that. What do you think, Evita?
Yeah, I mean, this is what I wrote my article about. Is I think that the problem is not, country music fans per se. What it is corporate country and radio in Nashville who want to push this bro country, boyfriend country now is a new one on fans, and they don't. And actually, country fans aren't these sexist, people of the past. I mean, it's a genre that has embraced women for years, and so no, that's not what's happening here. What's happening is there's a disconnect between corporate country and fans, and that's why women aren't being played, and that's also why you're not seeing the subgenres of country being represented in radio, in the big labels. Is because there's this real disconnect. So there's all these subgenres like Texas country, and there's bluegrass, and there's red dirt, and there's all these different subgenres that actually make up what the real essence of country music is this regionalism in the United States, and they're not giving them a fair chance. And so I think that you made a great point in one of your articles saying, are we gonna stomp out the next Loretta Lynn? And the truth is, yeah, you probably will, because she's making culturally significant regional music, and country radio isn't playing it. They're interested in these kind of pop pop country, pop artist collab music that is gonna do a crossover and get fans in country music and pop, but it's not necessarily good country music. It's just profitable music.
You raise a really important point, which is that corporate country is destroying the cultural importance of the genre and getting really rich off it. They're diluting the cultural importance of the genre and just making bank. Now, the listenership of the country audience has shifted, and I think it's grown to include a lot more people who come from suburban areas as opposed to rural areas, who come maybe from the Northeast and coastal areas rather than the South and the Mountain West and the Midwest, and maybe more blue collar rural pockets of the country. I think the audience has shifted. Taylor Swift played a big role in that, and there's a genre that I think you can call carpool country, that you can look at now, where I'm trying to think of, like, I don't want to shade anyone too badly, but I don't know, this is some of the stuff that like Kenny Chesney does now, and it's just the best way to say it is carpool country. And what's fascinating is that Loretta Lynn, let's take somebody like Loretta Lynn. She was singing extremely subversive music that challenged traditionalism, that challenged the traditionalism of her listener base. Rated X, The Pill, you can look at some of these songs, and she's beloved. She wasn't, and she isn't like considered a unpatriotic, anti-American liberal by the country fan base. People love Loretta Lynn, and the fans are tolerant and accepting of those sort of challenges, but they have to be done well, and they have to resonate with the audience. And so to some extent there's less demand for that kind of music as country's base is sort of cosmopolitanized, and you have people who don't have the experiences that the traditional country base have, and so they're not going to be as interested in songs about the riverbank, and unless it's escapism, I don't know, and farming, and car maintenance, whatever else. These like actually really interesting themes in country music, and that sounds like a trivial one, but it's actually a really interesting one. And so you have a different listening base, you have a different listenership. At the same time, though, it's one of the most important trends in music, period, is the democratization that Spotify creates on the charts, right? So like, did you listen to most of your music on Spotify?
I actually don't. I have Apple Music. I'm one of those.
No, that's the same thing. So you stream music. You're not, yeah.
Yeah, of course.
Right. You're not like going to Walmart to pick up the CD the day that it comes out, or browsing at Best Buy, or any of those other old CD stores. Do you remember CD stores, Evita?
No, I've never been to a CD store. I don't know what that is, Emily.
See, now somebody older than me would be making fun of me for not saying record store, but saying CD store. But I mean,
Record stores are like a cool, trendy thing on campus now, but like only the alternative kids go there. It's not a real thing.
it used to be full stores, and it was like a treat at the mall. You would go into the store that sold CDs, and there'd just be racks and racks and racks of CDs, and you would browse and you would decide which ones you wanted and who you were going to try out. But anyway, I have gotten really off track with my point to the I don't know what I was talking about. But
No worries.
we're talking about streaming, and so as country music has been democratized and disrupted by the streaming industry, I think you've seen people like Maren Morris and Casey Musgraves soar. And Musgraves is very much in the vein of Loretta Lynn. She's a super clever writer. She is subversive to traditionalism. She does challenge traditionalism, and she's been perfectly successful. So this notion that she has been hampered by sexism that is keeping other women off the country charts, I just think it doesn't hold up to scrutiny.
No, it doesn't. And I think that you raised a really good point when we talk about, who's really upset about this country, about country music and the shift that we've seen to bro country. And there is that, older person who's upset about the old days, right? But there is a lot of young people who appreciate good music, and they saw Casey Musgraves, and they rewarded her for being a good artist. And I think that there are other people out there too, that aren't getting that kind of recognition simply because the industry is just so stifling and is only allowing a certain type of music to type of genre, like subgenre of country, to do well, and that is the boyfriend bro country genre. And I think that this the, what they're trying to feed us is that it's bringing diversity, right? They're saying this is a new kind of country. We're diversifying it. We're adding in pop and hip hop and rap, and it sounds great. The product has been country that's becoming less unique, less diversified, because it all is starting to sound the same. I mean, somebody a YouTuber that I love broke down some of the biggest country songs of the year and found that they, like, almost all of them, and this was in 2019, had this snap track. The
Yeah.
snap track, right? They all used it. I mean, where is the diversity in that? It's not. So country fans, they appreciate people who are clever, people who are doing good things like Casey Musgraves. They rewarded them, but unfortunately, there are a lot of people who haven't been able to get that fan recognition because mainstream country has been pretty stifling.
Yeah, and to unpack that a bit, we've been talking a lot about demand, and it's kind of like the corporate media, in that the corporate media, like if there was a bunch of demand, a lot of demand for rap fusion and country music before they started forcing it down everybody's throats, and if there was some people do this really well. Dirt Road Anthem is just a classic and a great example of sort of that fusion and integrating rap into country music in a way that I think is authentic and sincere and worked coherently. But at the same time, like, there's some of these songs that are just throw it in there. It's so clumsy. It's so terrible. So if there were a legitimate demand for that, if that was really speaking to the lives and the experiences of the listenership, fine. I would be disappointed because I don't think that it carries the torch of prior generations. I mean, country music has always been adapting and changing and evolving over the years, and Ken Burns did a really good job of tracing that arc. So it's true. I mean, things are always going to change, but the change can't dilute the cultural importance of country music, which is more important now than ever, as we see sort of people from rural backgrounds, blue collar backgrounds, essentially getting bulldozed out of having any representation in pop culture. And that's what country music always did. And Evita, to your point about the genre becoming less diverse, country music in and of itself was an addition to diversity, right? Like, this was where those rural perspectives and those blue collar perspectives, and like, that's where they had representation. And it's fading away. So I think, that's why we're also seeing roots artists thrive. And I've reported this out and having conversations with several roots artists at the Federalist. They are seeing, they're having an easier time getting listened to with the streaming industry. And I think that's because people are turning to them instead of, listening to hot country if they're going to be bombarded with a bunch of the snap track every other song.
Right. No, I couldn't agree with that more. And I think that that is an upside to this is the streaming services and what they've done for country music. So they're I mean, as you know, sometimes I get sad when I see when I see the hit charts and everything, but it's like, there is a lot of hope out there too. And that makes me happy that people that you've interviewed are saying that, because that's great.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's, one of the people that I talked to over the summer was a female country artist, very much in the vein of somebody like Dolly and Loretta. And there really is an appetite for that. Corporate country isn't feeding it to the listenership. So they are going to drift to real country artists, which is great because they preserve that cultural importance of the genre. And it's not to say there aren't people doing great things in country music. It's a total mixed bag right now. There are some people who are succeeding, Stapleton Church, doing really rootsy, interesting, artsy stuff. And then on the other hand, you do have whatever Evita's calling boyfriend country. It sounds like country. You have people doing that, Florida Georgia line. So it's a mixed bag right now, but I think sort of like corporate media, corporate country executives in the industry doesn't totally understand their fan base. Evita, this is how we're going to end. Who is your favorite female country artist?
Oh my goodness, Emily, I can't believe you're putting me on the spot here. I mean, it changes all the time. I would say right now I've been listening to a lot of Ashley McBryde, and I know that she is kind of in the mainstream, but she actually is one of the really interesting artists who's had a long journey in country music, and for a long time she was creating really interesting, really kind of rootsy, almost kind of dark and gothic music that wasn't being recognized. And really recently, she started to get some more mainstream recognition. And so I've really appreciated her and the journey that she's made. And she's one of the few success stories who's come out of the fray. So I love her. I've been listening to her a lot recently, but can I say that she's my all-time favorite? It'll probably change next week. I don't know.
Oh, this is a perfect way actually to end it, because Ashley is she's the best example of what we just talked about, in that she actually really came up through, like, she was kind of an Americana roots artist, and she was able to make her way into the contemporary country, like literally into the charts, because
Right.
people love that. Like she sounds, Ashley McBryde, some of the music off her most recent album sounds almost indistinguishable from what you would have heard on country radio in the 90s. So, she's not out here doing, something that you'd hear in Hee Haw, but she actually is honoring the genre in a way that's like really good writing, just great music without a lot of filtering and sound effects and all of that nonsense.
Right.
She's able to make it because of streaming. She's someone who probably wouldn't have gotten played on the charts if streaming was out there, because they thought the appetite in country music was leaning more towards this new weird sound and whatever Sam Hunt's doing. So
Yeah, that's true. Absolutely.
awesome. Evita, thank you so much. This was super interesting. That is Evita Duffy. I'm Emily Jashinsky. We will be back soon with more. Make sure to like and subscribe and leave us a comment if you have something to say.